Good evening. It is 6:30 on Monday, January 25th, 2021, and I now call the Winton Woods City School Board of Education meeting to order. During this meeting, we ask that all attendees wear masks at all times unless speaking. With that said, our first item on the agenda is 1.02. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the roll call. So, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Birdie?
Present.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Present.
Dr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. McGowan?
Present.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Present. Next item on the agenda is 2.01, District Honors, Recognitions, Gifts, and Introductions. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President and Board, thank you. The first one is there have been several groups working with the We Thrive community, and I'd like to read the proclamation in recognition of the 2020 We Thrive schools. This comes from the Board of Health and Hamilton County Public Health. Whereas Hamilton County Health's We Thrive initiative, established in 2009, creates partnerships between communities, agencies, and public health to generate broad-based support for creating healthy environments for all residents where they live, work, learn, and play. Whereas the We Thrive initiative encourages long-lasting change through creation and adoption of policies that support the health, safety, and vitality among all sectors of the community. And whereas Hamilton County Public Health expanded the We Thrive initiative in 2016 to establish infrastructure and a support to enact and sustain meaningful change within schools, and whereas the We Thrive initiative seeks to engage schools in the development of wellness committee dedicated to focusing on major areas of health and safety in school environments, and whereas the Winton Woods City Schools assumed an active leadership role in improving the health and safety of its staff and students as a We Thrive school district. Now for there be proclaimed that Winton Woods City Schools District has successfully met or exceeded continuation and requirements for 2020 We Thrive school recognition. Be it further proclaimed that the Board of Health of Hamilton County Public Health recognizes Winton Woods City Schools for its ongoing commitment to improving the health, safety, and vitality of its school district. And I took the opportunity to read the proclamation simply because knowing that we've gone through this whole pandemic with COVID, and now we have We Thrive, and we're committed to working collectively together, these two actually work together in conjunction with what we're trying to do with Greg Kesterman and he is the health commissioner who's actually signed off on the document. So the We Thrive committee is comprised of Mr. Denny, Mrs. Denny, and then we have people part of the community with Jermaine Hill from Forest Park. So there are several districts that are part of We Thrive, and we're going to continue to keep doing it because I think it kind of creates a seamless pattern of what we're trying to do as it relates to healthy students and healthy lives. All right? The next one is Northrop Grumman donated $2,000 to purchase a Padlet license for teachers. Ms. Hobbs or someone from Teaching and Learning, can you give the board a little quick overview of what the Padlet license will do? Okay, very good. So Northrop Grumman, thank you very much, $2,000. The next one is January is School Board Recognition Month. And Emma?
The staff, students, and communities of the Winton Woods High School join the Ohio Schools Board Association to honor the exemplary leadership, service, and endless hours of dedication given by our elected board members on behalf of the school district and its communities. We thank our board members, President Mrs. Katrina Ruggles, Vice President Dr. Viola Johnson, and board members Mr. Jeff Birdie, Dr. John Cupoletti, and Mr. Geno Mick Owens, Winton Woods High School Student Council President, me, Emma Smith, will now present certificates of appreciation on behalf of the OSBA to our board members. And first up is President Katrina Ruggles.
Podium.
Next is Vice President Dr. Viola E. Johnson. And then we have Mr. Jeff Birdie. And next is Dr. John Cupoletti. And then lastly, we have Mr. Geno Mick Owens.
Before you guys sit down, we had planned a great event. It was going to be a parade that goes through Forest Park, Springfield Township, and Green Hills. But because of COVID-19, we're not allowed to do it at this point. So we will actually put a big parade and a big showcase and activity together. So there needs to be someone from the board making a statement about someone from the board needs to make a statement about the proclamation or about the Board Recognition Month.
Good evening. My name is Katrina Ruggles, and I am the newly selected board president of the Winton Woods City School District. And I speak on behalf of my fellow board members that it is a pleasure to serve our community, especially during this very tricky time with COVID-19. We look forward to continuing to work with the staff and administration to make sure that we have a healthy and safe environment for the Warrior Nation. Thank you.
Is there any other member from the board that would like to say something?
No, she covered it very well.
She covered it very well. Dr. Johnson, anything? Dr. Cupoletti? I think Dr. Johnson's trying to tell us something as she unmutes herself.
I don't think she is.
Can you unmute her, Ms. Hobbs?
I cannot. I asked her to unmute herself.
Here I am. I'm unmuted. I thought I had unmuted it. I'm sorry.
Okay, you want to say something on behalf of Board Recognition Month?
Yes, I'd just like to say that we really appreciate our community partners, and also to thank everyone for thank the OSBA and the council, city council, or community council for the students for the appreciation to the board. We do this work it's a labor of love, and we also appreciate the efforts that the people around us, the administration and the staff, that they do to help us do our job, because we really couldn't do what we do without the support of the team that the superintendent and the treasurer have put together, and their work efforts make what we do a little bit easier. So we appreciate the appreciation that you've shown us, and also to say that we appreciate you for doing your jobs the way you do too. So thank
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Cupoletti, anything to add, sir?
No, but thank you very much for the recognition, and I agree with everything that President Ruggles and Vice President said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Madam President and Board, that's all for the gifts and honors and recognitions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The next item on the agenda is a recess, but if it's okay with everyone, seeing that we don't have any guests to leave, we can forego the recess. Is everybody okay with that?
Sounds good. Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. The next item on the agenda is 4.01, which is public comments, and it also doesn't look like we have any public comments tonight. So we'll move right on into agenda item 5.01, which is comments from the Winton Woods Teachers Association. Do we have a representative from the Teachers Association? I can't see. Do we? Okay, seeing as none, we can move on to item number 5.02, which is the Ohio Association of Public School Employees. Do we have a representative from OPSE who would like to speak this evening? Is that no? Oh, okay. All right, we'll move right on into item number 6.01, which is the approval of the minutes. Board, unless you see any necessary changes to these minutes, a motion would be in order.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. McGowens,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles.
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 7.01, the Treasurer's Report. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, for the month of ending December 31st, halfway through the school year, our general fund revenues were at approximately 50% of estimate at $25.2 million. For the month, we received approximately $2.6 million, which was from our state foundation. Our general fund expenditures for the year to date were right at $25 million, which is currently 5% under budget for approximately $3 million under budget for one half of the year. I'd also like to mention that our expenditures in comparisons to our 5-year forecast are running very close and are only approximately $150,000 under the projected 5-year forecast currently. For the end of December, we had $42.1 million in all funds unencumbered, $17 million in the general fund, and $16.7 in classroom facilities. And that's basically a summary for the December financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. With no objections being heard, let the financial statements for the month of December 2020 be submitted for audit. The next item on the agenda is 8.01. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor for the treasurer's investments for December 2020.
For the month of December, the district had $42 million invested. For the month, we earned $13,500, of which the general fund was $6,100 and building funds $7,300. And as you probably can tell, our investments are dwindling as our payouts for the construction comes near the end of our construction phase.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the investment report as presented.
Thank you, Dr.
I'll
Johnson.
second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Kuboletti?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. McGowens?
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.01 through 9.02, which are reports of the superintendent. Please note that these are informational reports and no action will be taken by vote. And time will be given at the end of Mr. Smith's report for the board to ask questions. With that said, Mr. Smith, you have the floor for 9.01.
Yes, the reports today, because I'm sure the board is aware that there's not a lot of activity happening in the schools, even though we're in a blended session. So the reports will actually come the way they came last month, where Mrs. Bray and Mrs. Wilson will give an overview based on staff and COVID as well as students. Ms. Bray and Ms. Wilson.
Good evening. I'll start with the staff. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. My glasses are fogging up, so. So what Mr. Smith asked us to look at is the exposures and the quarantines and isolations that staff had beginning with December 20th through January 10th, which is roughly the time we broke for winter break until we reported back. Initially on our school calendar, we were going to return to an in-person opportunity the week of January 4th. But Mr. Smith, similar to what we did with the Thanksgiving break, thought that we needed a week to cool off, because from the super spreader events such as Christmas, Christmas celebrations and New Year's. So what we looked at was the period of December 20th through January 10th. And so for staff, we had 17 during that period that were in quarantine. And we had 8 that were actually positive with COVID, where if we had returned the week of the 5th in person, instead of taking that week to cool off, we would have had a situation where that many staff could have potentially impacted students and other staff. And then once again, similar to what we used the same kind of equation that we used for the Thanksgiving break, where we estimated that each staff works with roughly 3 other adults during the day in what we would call close contact. The average class size in this blended model is roughly 10 students per day in a class, except for on Wednesdays, and 50 students at the high school. So high school teachers have a bigger caseload, except for Wednesdays. Again, our transportation staff, they transport parochial school and private school students as well as our own students. And they have their normal ridership, so they don't have reduced ridership because of that on some of those routes. So if you multiply the isolated 8 staff times 3 possible close contacts, at least 24 other staff members could have potentially been infected had we not taken the week to cool off. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that is what I have for you for a staff report. It's also available in hard copy if you wanted to look at it more closely. Do you have any questions about staff? Okay, well then Ms. Bray is going to talk about students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So the time frame stays consistent for the students as well. I'm not sure if that is the student report is coming up on the screen. So for our students, we had during that time frame from December 20th through January 10th, we had 86 students who were quarantined and 7 students who were isolated. And so most of these students that fit in either one of these categories were athletes. So that's why you see a larger number of students who were affected. So I guess once that is brought up on the screen, what I had done was I broke down the formulas for our blended model. So I wanted to show that how it would affect our student population if they were to come to school twice a week for most of our kids, the green day and the blue day, and for some of our kiddos, they come on 4 days a week, and that excludes Wednesdays. So for the most part, if they were to have attended during the blended model week, especially during that January 5th through 10th, potential exposure would have been about 490 students. If students were to attend during a typical week, which is in person every day, 5 days a week, the potential exposure could have been roughly 1,200 students affected. So I wanted to kind of break that down to show you in the blended model, less students would be affected 5 days a week, a little more would have been affected had they come right after winter break.
And to the, based on the report that Ms. Wilson and Ms. Bray provided, some of the schools did not take a break after the winter break, meaning once they came back from winter break, they came right back. And the numbers that Ms. Bray has just shared about students actually happened in several districts. Those numbers were elevated because of the exposure from athletes, the activities, the no mask, the celebrations. And we just thought that in order to protect our community, it was very important for us to wait a week to see just how things would turn out. And we were not surprised that the numbers were like they were. They were really right on target based on what both of the ladies projected could happen based on exposure from adults as well as children. So kudos to both of you for the research and bringing me the information saying, Superintendent, if we waited a week, we could actually have a different outcome. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Are
Ms.
there any questions?
Yeah, for the audience and for anybody who might be watching, can you please explain the difference between quarantine and isolated?
Yes, so when a student is isolated, that means that they are positive. So they have to be in isolation for a minimum of 10 days. And so that means they have to be away from the student population, work, what have you, and they have to be isolated in their home, away from other people who are not affected. Quarantine are for students and staff or people who may have been in contact with a person who is either positive or probable positive. And that means that they have to stay away from the general population for at least 14 days, 14 days minimally, without any signs or symptoms.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. And Mr. Smith, and I know Jeff, you and I were talking a little bit about that there's some change to how students are quarantined. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, Ms. Bray, can you give more information about how the 10-day versus the 14-day came about and
Right.
how we're kind of holding ourselves to the gold standard of 14?
So yes, there was an update with classroom quarantine. So Governor DeWine stated that if we're following all the CDC guidelines, meaning 6 feet distance in classrooms, everyone is wearing their mask, that potentially we would not need to quarantine. However, the district has made the decision to err on the side of caution to make sure all staff and students are safe. And so we are taking every case, every student, every staff on a case-by-case basis. So we cannot be 100% if everyone is 6 feet. We cannot be 100% if everyone has their mask on and pulled up at all times. So if there is any suspicion of a suspected case, we will look at those on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
And I do have a question. It's actually a scenario that I heard about from one of my summer baseball league players that goes to school in Kentucky, and he plays on the basketball team. And they weren't able to come to practice. I've got two kids from this particular school, and one of their teammates, I guess, tested positive. So they quarantined the team and said, okay, you can't come to school, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the kids, who happens to be one of my players, had COVID before, within the last 90 days. So they told him he's fine, he can come back to school. So he doesn't have to be quarantined. If we had a situation like that, is that what we would do?
No. So again, we err on the side of caution.
Sure.
And so if any student is around a person that we know is positive, we take immediate action, and that student is quarantined until we see signs or symptoms. We ask them to get tested to ensure that they are safe from affecting other staff and students.
And
So,
yeah, thank you, Ms. Bray. I think that's the real question, Mr. McGowan. The student had COVID before, but the rest of the people in his community may not have had it. So he may have been exposed again, which may carry the trait. We don't know, because it's so scientific that we have to be very, very careful. If someone says, hey, I had COVID, now I can do whatever I want, but there's still a large group of people that haven't had any signs and symptoms or haven't had exposure to COVID. And I think that there are times where when people say they had it, and I know we're going to get into a conversation about the vaccine later, that people tend to be a little more cavalier when they've had it, but we still have to protect the rest of the community. So that's what's important to us.
I just didn't know if that was standard operating procedure, that if you've had it within 90 days, now you don't have to go into quarantine, or maybe that's just something they're doing in Kentucky versus what we're doing in Ohio.
right, and you know, that's personal opinion to me. I feel that that's a myth. You just don't know. You know, the standard day is 90 days. However, you can get it before the 90 days is up. So, you know, we want to make sure that our staff and students are safe at all times. So if we know that someone is around someone that we know is positive, they go into immediate quarantine.
Sure.
And we have had cases actually on our campus where the person had COVID and then they got COVID again. They're rare cases, but it does happen. And we don't know how to test you to see if it's going to affect other people. So in order to protect the rest of the community, the whole goal right now is how diligent are we going to be to protect the rest of the community before people can get a vaccine? That has to be our responsibility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Bray.
You're welcome.
And Mrs. Wilson. And I'd like to say, you know, I really think it's really admirable that we have been very consistent in what it is that we say we're going to do. And, you know, we had talked about, Jeff and I had talked about earlier how there was the change at the state. And it's good to know that we have decided to keep a level of standard to make sure that our children and staff are safe. Yeah. Go. Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying thank you. Yes.
None of this would have been possible.
Can you go to the mic?
Mrs. Bray and I would be remiss if we didn't give credit to the nurses, our school nurses, who have literally called and returned phone calls and texted all day and all night, through the breaks, on and off the clock. They've been wonderful. So Lisa Lip, Jeanette Goins, Kimberly Morris, and then the Hamilton County nurses that we employ also in our buildings have been absolutely phenomenal. And their record keeping is awesome. They're accessible. They return calls, and they really help keep us in compliance. And I often joke and call them the Dr. Actons of Winton Woods. They've gotten death threats, from telling people that we have to cancel sport, recommending that we have to cancel sports or, stop different things that people want to proceed with. But they have really been helped us stay honest with this, because it is a lot. It's a lot of work. So thank you, nurses.
And I do know that, again, so Ms. Wilson and Ms. Bray are our contact tracers in our district. They said that you can designate a person. We designated 2. It fits the role of HR and also students with disabilities. So they didn't fall into the role accidentally. It's actually part of their job, and it makes it make sense. The one thing that I will say about the nurses, as well as the 2 executives that work with me, Wilson and Bray, they've received calls every day during the break, the whole time. Every day they received a call about, but the good thing about it is we have to commend the community for even making those calls. Right. Because they could have counted their 14 and says, I'm not telling you anything, my 14 days will be up by the time you find out. The community, and so the message that we're getting to OPSI and to the Teachers Association and to administrators, they have to be commended because they could have just been silent. They gave us information that we needed in order for us to have a substantial report. So again, thanks to the entire community of Winton Woods City Schools.
Thank you. Are you done with 9.01?
9.01, I do have one more thing to give you. Right now, and I'm going to just round it up to 75%, we sent out our survey today, so I wanted people to know 75% of our staff is willing to be vaccinated.
So on the reports, it says February 9th.
It depends on what your relationship is with Mercy or what your relationship is with Kroger's. We're in close proximity to the Kroger's. We wouldn't send people over there. They would actually come here. So we're trying to get it coordinated through Hamilton County ESC, and as soon as we get a schedule, we will let people know.
I had one other question. I see that there's conferences. Are those in person or virtual or blended?
Teaching and learning.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the facilities update. Mr. Smith and Mr. Denny, you have the floor.
So we have Mr. Denny at the resort giving his overview. It's the estate right outside of Reno. So Mr. Denny, can you give the overview about the facilities?
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Smith. I truly wish it was as picturesque as you portrayed it, but I can't complain. So good evening, board, and appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an update on our facilities projects. We are approaching completion, which is very exciting. And I just want to take a chance while I have this moment too to remind everyone at home that you're tuning in now, or you might be tuning in later on Waycross Community Media, one of our partners. It is available online at www.wintonwoods.org. You can scroll to the bottom of the screen and search for construction updates, and you can see a weekly updated synopsis and summary with some great photos. You can see it on the screen there at this time, and you can see how the buildings are really coming together, and it's really exciting to see that. So thanks to our community partners at Waycross, and also we appreciate our construction management company, Skanska Megan, and our design partners, SHP, that assist with being sure this is up to date. So I do have news I'd like to share, and I can share that we continue to stay on budget for this project, which is exciting and very meaningful, and we're very pleased to be able to continue to report that. But I do have news that at this time we have what appears to be our first delay of the project. And the good news is that from a scheduling standpoint, it is not a delay that will interfere with our move-in or our occupation of the building, or move-in in March, I should say, when we plan to open the school. for the 712 in particular. The K6, of course, not until later in August of this year. But we do have a delay for occupancy, and that's specifically related to the temporary certificate of occupancy that's issued by the local authorities having jurisdiction. We have a 2.5-week delay at this time. So the construction management company is going to be extending what they call a zero cost change order. There's no dollar amount tied to it, but it is a request for additional time. And the reason for that is it's not related to construction. The construction continues on schedule. The building is probably close to 95% complete now. You can see that in a lot of the photos, and if you happen to be driving by. But what we have is an issue related to one of the life safety systems, in particular the fire alarm, and it is not going to be ready by the initial turnover date or completion date or occupancy date of February 10th. So we are going to receive a request from the construction management firm to move that back to February 26th. It's largely related to permitting. We've had the vendor that's been a great partner throughout this process that is in charge of readying the fire alarm systems has had a medical incident, and we're not going to be able to have them online to do all the testing that has to happen to get it fully functional in time for February 10th. So we might have it sooner than that, but they're requesting February 26th. So that's an update on schedule. I can and I'm happy to take questions too, because you may have some, and that'd be a great thing. I will finish out that you can even see in the update, we've got a lot of progress in the building itself, and the building itself is approaching completion. Of course, we still have site work to do on the site itself, parking lots, drives, other utility and infrastructure things to complete that will occur once the demolition process is started on both sites, both the South Campus in Green Hills and the North Campus in Forest Park. But we have flooring is nearing completion. Auditorium seating is completed. Classroom furniture continues to be assembled. Office furniture is probably over 2/3 to 75% completed. Signage is well on its way and is really kind of making the building come alive. The graphics and use of color and the signage looks really great. Exterior and interior. Gyms are completed. The high school arena floor striping and floor installation is complete, and it looks really, really good. We're very pleased with how that's turned out. TV installation's ongoing. And of course, the network is up and running at both sites, and IP addresses are being assigned for the hundreds and hundreds of smart devices in the building. So I'm very pleased about that. And that essentially concludes the facilities update at this time. I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments you might have.
Mr. Denny, can
Yes,
you hear
sir.
me? You promised me that I would get a chance to have the first dunk in the new gym, and so I've been working. I hear Waycross laughing. I'm not quite sure why they're laughing about that, but you promised that I would have the first opportunity. I've been working on something, so I think I'm about ready. So let me know how that turns out, and make sure that ladder is available so I can get it off the way I want to. The other part is thank you for...
And have Waycross there.
You will have Waycross there?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And then I'll do a signing afterwards, something, just for the public. But thank you very much. When you came to my office and talked to me about the fire suppression system and what the delay was, we were not discouraged because we had already planned some things ahead. So thank you for your foresight to anticipate that there may be some issues. And we're actually very, very happy because we've not had any delays before of this magnitude. So that's a good thing. I mean, for buildings of this size, we're very, very fortunate that we've not had anything that would just kind of take us off task. And I think the part that you mentioned that was the most compelling piece is we're still on schedule for the reopening. I mean, for the opening for March, for spring. Okay, so thank you again. Board, anything?
I had one question. If my memory serves me, and it may not, there was a question about the size of our signs. Did that get solved?
Yes, sir, we did. And Mr. Denny, you want to go into that a little more detail about, it was a process we had to undertake, but this is the largest signage that the community has ever had, Dr. Cupoletti. So, Mr. D?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mr. Smith. I appreciate the question too. Yeah, as Mr. Smith alluded to, the signage on the front of the high school arena, which will face Kemper Road, it says in big, large white block letters that will be backlit at night. I think it'll look really, really impressive and lend a lot of school spirit to people driving by. But it was the largest, according to the City of Forest Park, it was the largest sign that had ever come before the zoning commission. And of course, they have some ordinances related to the square footage of a sign. I believe if it's over, I think it's 32 square feet in size, it has to be taken through a zoning hearing and then approved per their ordinances. An example of that would be the signage at the Charlie Frederick Winton Woods High School Stadium, the athletic stadium. That had to go through an approval process as well, but this absolutely dwarfed that in size. And it received unanimous approval from the zoning commission after the presentation. And again, SHP, a great partner of ours, helped support that request. But yeah, it was approved, and I think we'll be very pleased with how it'll turn out. It's visible in the daytime, but I think it'll be very visible at night.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Denny and Mr. Smith. I too concur that I think that it is amazing that we have had our first major delay. Anybody who had built a home or been a part of the building process know that sometimes delays happen. So it's good to see that this one is not going to delay us getting the buildings open on time, the schedule for that, as well as the excitement continues to grow. So the next item on the agenda is items 10.1 through 10.03, which are Superintendents Recommendations, and will be approved by board vote. So a motion and a second will be needed. That said, Mr. Smith, you have the floor for Personnel Schedules 10.01.
Yes, Madam President and Board. The recommendation is to approve Schedule A, resignations, Schedule C, personnel employment, Schedule D, personnel employment, which is certificated and uncertificated staff, and finally Schedule E, which is leaves.
Board, a motion is in order.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the personnel schedules as presented.
I'll second it.
It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call that vote?
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles.
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the second read of policies. This includes the policies that were presented from last month, and its replacement, rejected, and revised policies. Mr. Smith, can you give us some more information on these policies?
What information would you like?
Well, would you like to share anything about the new, the revised, or the rejected policies? I know we discussed them last month, but
Yeah, the only thing that will stare at you is the student section in 5610, based on the removal of a student for suspension. And so in 5610, the removal, suspension, expulsion, and permanent exclusion of students, the code of conduct has to be followed very, very closely, because not in our district, there have been students that have been put out of school and the process did not go the way it was supposed to. Not that the student should not have been put out, but the due process. So in the event that there's a student who has committed some infraction against the school and you don't follow the due process, that student more than likely is not going to be removed because you did not follow the steps, okay? So there's a section in it that says, in determining whether a student is to be suspended or expelled, district administrators shall use a preponderance of evidence standard. That means there has to be a standard that we use, that we follow very, very closely, based on where our report says this is a violation, here's our policy, here's our code of conduct, and there has to be a preponderance of evidence that supports that whether the student should be removed or not. There have been too many cases where the students have been removed, and when the courts get involved, they say that there was not a preponderance of evidence, and that student has to be allowed to come back to school, and there may have to be some special circumstances to bring the student up to speed.
Thank you. I think it's important that when we do have the second reads of these policies, board members, if you have questions, and I think it's very important, one thing that I do like about the policies and the way that they are presented, it highlights what's a replacement policy, what has been rejected, and what is revised. So getting an update is good to make sure that everybody is clear on what is expected and what we're voting on.
And then the
Thank you.
final piece is the ESI, which is the electronic stored information. Whenever a student is up for disciplinary actions and they are being removed or recommended to be expelled, you must keep that data. You cannot destroy it, you cannot discard it, you cannot say we're going to move it to another place and shred it. It always has to be there. And how long they say it just has to be there. They don't give you a timeline, that it just has to be there. So if they ever want to come back and have questions about it, that data has to be very, very secure, and it also has to be very accurate. So that electronic data must always be there. In some cases, once a student had graduated or they were already moved through, people were attempting to move data out of files. That is absolutely illegal to do. You cannot do that.
Okay, board, a motion is in order.
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve the second read of the new rejected, replacement, and revised board policies as presented.
I'll second it.
Who was that, Dr. Johnson? Okay. It has been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? I will say this. One thing that I do appreciate is that we've been given a lot of policies and breaking them up to have an opportunity to thoroughly go through the policies so that we understand them is very important, and it's appreciated because we could have been inundated with I don't know how many policies over the last couple of months. But one question that I do have for you, Mr. Smith, when you break them up, is there a process that you take that shows which ones, you know, order of importance? Or?
Yeah, we actually have a process where Neola comes in and gives us an overview. Sometimes they'll say, this is a hot topic, so you need to get a policy on this one quickly, or your policy for this particular one is outdated. And then what I end up doing is we go back to legal, Ms. Wilson, and she will look at the policies, vet those same policies with Neola, and then we come back as a group to look at them before we bring them to the board. So they were actually viewed about 4 different times before we bring them back to make sure that there are no errors. Or what we want to do is try to keep them in a cluster so that they actually have the same kind of meaning as opposed to being all over the place. But again, there's exceptions to it where he will come up and say, this particular policy has several districts in trouble. You may want to make a revision on yours so that you don't have the same problems down the road.
Thank you. And I think that's helpful. So if any of the board members had any questions of why it says Neola, October 2020, and then looking at the number of policies that we got and having them broken up, that's the reason why we get some of them sooner than the other, and it's not, you know, although it's October, we're getting caught up with some of the other
Some districts
ones.
do them alphabetically, but we do them based on the need of what the issues might actually turn into.
Board, are there any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. McGowans,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles?
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 10.03. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President, thank you. This particular section of the GMP amendment, Mr. Denny is going to give the overview of the commission program for facilities assistance. We're part of a program which is really good. When you hear about the dollar amount of $1,452,209.28 to demolish these buildings, you will appreciate that we're part of a program where we're talking about a 50% situation as opposed to the whole bill. All right, Mr. D?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Smith. Board, you should have before you at this time a resolution. This is a state-generated and Skanska, Megan, and district agreed upon memoranda. This resolution, however, is for your consideration, and we would respectfully request your consideration and positive approval. But it does cover the cost for the demolition of the existing Winton Woods High School and the existing Winton Woods Middle School. As you know, we are engaged in and nearing completion on the construction of the two new buildings, which are side-by-side builds, as it's said, meaning we built the K-6, the new South Campus, right on the same site as the existing middle school because it was large enough to accommodate a building of that size and the required parking per fire code and building code. And the same can be said for the high school as well. So we built the new North Campus, the secondary campus, on the existing site of the high school. So it's necessary, of course, to complete the demolition of the buildings. This is the resolution that authorizes those contract documents to be executed to go ahead and move forward with the demolition. And as Mr. Smith stated, I think it's worth just mentioning and perhaps appreciating that because of the collaboration with the state of Ohio and the agreement and master plan that the district entered into with the state to modernize and upgrade the facilities in which children and staff and community learn, grow, and utilize in our district, this is co-funded state dollars. So when you see the price tag in the resolution of the 1.4 million, it's worth noting that the district pays about half of that. The district pays 51% per the agreement with the state, which so those are co-funded dollars from the state of Ohio. And then the local share, the state share is 49%, excuse me, the local share is 51. So it's roughly a 50-50 split. So basically the state's matching 50 cents on every dollar, 49 cents on every dollar to complete this work. So again, you have before you this resolution. We do respectfully request your consideration and hopefully your subsequent approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. Mr. Smith, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, Mr. Denny, the board would feel at ease to know that this co-funded dollar amount comes from where?
Yeah, the co-funded dollar amount, the state shares, of course, from the state of Ohio, the OFCC, the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. The local share comes from the monies passed by the 2016 bond. As you know, and the board's aware, those bond dollars can only be used for brick and mortar construction. They can only be used for costs associated with the approved master plan. In this case, the construction and demolition of new facilities. So these are funded from the bond issue that passed in 2016, specifically the local share that the residents approved.
And these are not funds that have to be generated or secured from the general fund by going back to Mr. Seymour for any resolutions or any more conversation, correct?
That's 100% correct, Mr. Smith. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Board, a motion is in order.
Oh, Madam President, before you move forward, Mr. Denny, in your resolution, we're only talking about 2 buildings, correct? No more. So
Yes, sir.
I know that there is a land use plan down the road for other buildings, but that conversation is not even on the table yet, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Board, a motion is in order.
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution guaranteed maximum price amendment to the construction manager at-risk agreement with Skanska-Megan for a joint venture for the abatement and demolition of the middle school and high school with the Ohio School Facilities Construction Commission Classroom Facilities Assistance Program as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie.
I'll second it.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. McGowans,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles.
Aye. The vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the legislative reports. Mr. Smith, will you please provide the legislative report?
Yes. The main piece of the legislative report, there's not a lot of information circulating in the state or in Columbus. The main piece for us right now is the survey that's been done in conjunction with the ODE regarding vaccines and how many people are interested. Board, that survey was sent out, and if it did not come to you, we would like for you to complete the survey as well, because that will create, there's going to be some political conversations about how the vaccine is rolled out, but there's also some hesitation on some people's part based on religious attributes or religious affiliations in conjunction with it, and also some people are saying, I'm just not interested, which may create some a political climate. So right now, we're at close to 75%. That 75% may be higher simply because some people on the survey may have already said, I've already had it. So it depends on what field they work in, other than they may do some other work other than Winton Woods City Schools. And we're excited that this opportunity is coming our way, and it's being championed by Hamilton County ESC, Kroger's, and we are hoping that our partner Mercy is actively involved in it as well. Mr. Seymour, is there anything you want to add about how this, the funding or anything like this may happen as it relates to the vaccine? Is there any information from the Treasurer's Office?
The vaccine is totally 100% paid by the federal government, I believe.
Very
No
good.
school funds.
Very
nor
good.
School health care.
All right. So, and then there's a company that I believe it's out of Nebraska. The Jules smokeless kind of vapor kind of deal that's going on. That company is actually being sued by the school district in Nebraska because they're saying that this situation is actually harmful to our students. And I just want the board to be aware, if you're not aware, there is a smoke company that's right across the street, less than 100 yards. Mrs. Denny did some research to find out if there are any other school districts that have a smoke vape shop within 100 yards of a school district. And at this point, Mrs. Denny, did you locate anything substantial?
Not so far. I'm in communication with the Hamilton County Health Department regarding this. So we're in conversation about it, trying to get some data around that.
Okay, all right.
There's one in every school district.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next item on the agenda is 11.02, Great Oaks Career and Technical Report. Mr. Birdie, you have the floor.
I did email to all the board members, Mr. Smith, Mr. Seymour, some documents related to the recent Great Oaks School Board meeting. Some of the board highlights, they've elected a new chair and a new vice chair. Bill Ferguson is the chair, and Mary Cleveland is the new vice chair. Also attached a copy of Mr. Snyder's messages to the board for a couple of weeks, and a PowerPoint that he presented to the board on January 13th. There's a legislative report related to the career technical education programs, as well as a diversity and a unity committee report, which has been very prominent with Great Oaks over the last few months. And one of the things they're working on right now is identifying and setting up some training for board members. And then there's a spotlight on student report. We have a Carlos Nieves Pineda, job placement at tire discounters, and a Carolina Rendon, who's a Scholar Citizenship Award recipient. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. The next item on the agenda is 12.01, which is board motions and recommendations. Board, are there any motions or recommendations at this time? Seeing none, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the comments from the Board of Education and the Superintendent and Treasurer. So I will start with Mr. McGowan.
Just a quick comment. As we were going through the agenda and we got into about the policy manual, I read it before we came in, and I noticed where we had a policy to waive the school fees for instructional materials and things like that for the students. And I know it wasn't new, but I think it was just nice to see that, especially with what we're going through in the environment we're in right now. So it kind of made me proud to be a part of something like that. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that. So thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, board, and thank you, Winton Woods.
Yeah, you need to pass that one on to the collaboration between me and Mr. Seymour, because he was very, very strongly connected to making sure that the fees were waived. What happens, Mr. McGowan, when we look at our socioeconomic structure of our kids, and then we pass on these fees, it just doesn't make sense to us.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Seymour.
Okay, Dr. Cupoletti.
I have no questions. I have no comments.
All right. Mr. Birdie.
Just a couple of things. Obviously, thank you to Emma Smith, our high school student council president, for recognizing us from the Ohio School Board Association as well. I think Mrs. Ruggles pointed this out before. Mr. Denny, Skanska-Megan, SHP, and all the staff that are involved in the two facilities. It is impressive that we've gotten to this point, almost completion, and this is the only delay that we've had a conversation about. And I think it's superior planning on your all's part that it's actually not expected to impact what planned move-in dates were set up. So thank you all for your hard work. And then I saw an article in the Enquirer, I think Drew Jackson put that out there, Questbridge scholarships for 3 of our students that got full rides to some colleges, and I think that's just a phenomenal thing to see.
Major universities, yeah.
It was, one of them was Duke.
Yep.
Northwestern, and I may get the third one here. I don't think I have the third one with me.
But those students actually, Mr. Birdie, when I go back and recheck the names, I think they've been in front of the board before being recognized for outstanding achievement.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's phenomenal.
they were already on the horizon, ready to go.
And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Ruggles. I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that we had talked about throughout the meeting, to thank the We Thrive organization for partnering with the school district along with the Natorp Grumman for their donation to the school district. Just another shout out to say we thank them and we appreciate them. I had made a note to thank the school nurses, and I was glad to hear that Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Bray brought them up, that their record keeping and keeping track of the students and the people who need to be quarantined and isolated. We appreciate their efforts, because that's no small feat to take care of all of that record keeping and making sure that it's done accurately. And the other thing that we cannot forget, it's that in order for our buildings to stay clean, the janitorial staff must be doing an excellent job of cleaning up on that day to clean and sanitize the building. So we just want to, say thank you to them as well. I too, just like Mr. Birdie said, and all of us will probably reiterate, so excited to see the buildings coming up. Get to drive past the high school every day on my way in and out, if I go in and out. But just to see the high school coming up, and then going down and taking a look at the school in Green Hills, it's just, it's amazing, you know, what we've been able to accomplish with community support in building these buildings. And I know we're gonna have another operating levy coming up, but I would just want to encourage everyone just to say that, you know, even though, yes, it's tax dollars, but you see where the money is going. We're not just taking it and doing nothing with it. You see where it's going. I also want to thank this board and the administration for having the forethought back in, let's say, July, when we voted on the 3 different plans for our students returning to school. Because we have implemented all 3 of those plans, or at least 2 of those plans at this time. They haven't returned 100% for 5 days a week. But I see so many of the school districts now that are, you know, moving around and trying to figure out, still trying to figure out what to do with their students. And this board made the decision to approve 3 different distinct plans that, you know, allowed our administration to be able to pivot, you know, without any falter or anything, as they seen what the CDC or what the Hamilton County Commission or whatever they were going to say. So I just appreciate the work that we put into this, and that the administrators and that our teaching and learning staff and that they put into this and putting it together. One thing I wanted to note too on an academic note is that on our school calendar, and it would be for tomorrow, and I'm not sure that it's still going on, so Mr. Smith, you could speak to this, that at the high school, there was supposed to be PSAT testing all day on Tuesday, the 26th, January 26th, and also that there was going to be ACT testing in February, the first week in February. It's a Saturday, February the 6th. So just on an academic note to look at that. We've got some other things out there on our calendar, like the athletic signing day, and that's tentative, I guess, based on we've had so much going on in the athletic department, so we have to play that by ear, but just wanted to make a note of those 2 academic things that were gonna on the horizon. So thank you very much, Mrs. Ruggles. Back to you.
Thank you. Mr. Seymour?
No, thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, Madam President and Board, I'm happy to say that while we're dealing with the effects of COVID, and hopefully we're getting through it a lot sooner than people anticipated, the Teaching and Learning Department, Dr. Ragland, Dr. Martin, along with the Human Resources, Ms. Wilson and Mrs. Bray, we're starting to work on our summer program right now, because we know that there'll be some gaps, some instructional gaps that we need to fill in. So we're talking about having a robust summer program, getting all the kids who struggle, the kids that are gifted, the kids that are in the middle, and giving them the opportunity to improve academically rather than waiting until the fall. Because if you look at any of the information on the latest from President Biden's report, they mention that students of color are falling behind further and further and further, because many of those districts, those students are not even allowed to come to school. So the Chromebooks and those devices that we have working with kids in isolation or working with them remotely, I think it's doing some good, but education is a face-to-face opportunity, and we know you get more attributes by having kids face-to-face. So I am happy to say that on the March report, the March 8th report from the superintendent, you will start seeing us put together a robust summer school program that meets the needs of all of our students instead of waiting until the end. All right.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'd like to say, I think we covered a lot. Dr. Johnson certainly covered a lot of the things that I wanted to share, but I also wanted to reiterate my appreciation for our teaching and learning staff and our teachers. This is no easy feat, and I do not envy you at all. The fact that we did approve those 3 plans have really allowed us to work cohesively across the district to make sure that we are able to meet the needs of the students and the staff. Also, the appreciation for Ms. Bray and Ms. Wilson, you know, sharing that information to help us understand how we're doing with tracking our students and how we put things in place to have that 14-day gap and seeing that it is paying off. So I appreciate getting that information. I appreciate you all for being here tonight and sitting through the meeting. So the next item on the agenda is item 14.01, which is an executive session. Board, there is not a need for an executive session. So with that said, we'll move on to item 15.01. If there's nothing else and all minds are aligned, I'd like to say thank you to our Waycross partners for working with us and pivoting through our in-person and our blended meetings. I know it has been challenging at sometimes, but we appreciate your flexibility. And with that said, I will call the meeting of the Winton Woods City School District Board of Education.
Madam President, one more thing. To Ms. Hobbs and also to Waycross, this process that we've had to go through with the blended kind of operation, I don't know if you're bringing more equipment or new equipment, but it gets better every month. So I appreciate it very, very much. And thank you guys for putting all this together, because I know it takes a lot.
You're absolutely right, Ms. Hobbs. I am so sorry that I forgot to mention you, because you have been a pivotal part of getting us inside of our meetings when we have to do executive session and holding a breakout. So thank you very much. And with that said, I'll call this meeting of the Winton Woods Board of Education, January 25th, 2021, adjourned. Thank you. Be safe.